Hi, everybody.
You
Okay,
are
let's
alive.
hear from the peanut gallery.
Yeah.
We don't have any Micah
We're
yet, but Mike
live.
Kuipers is there. He can tell us what our sound sounds like.
Yep. What happened to the American flag there, Nixie?
I have been
Someone burnt it.
no. I have been doing
They throw you out?
some wiring diagram stuff,
Uh-huh.
Oh,
and so I had about six or seven documents taped up to the wall back there, trying to do all of my organization, and then right as I was signing on, I thought, oh, my boss probably wouldn't like me to have all that stuff up in the video,
Yeah, probably not.
projected out to everybody to
Like
see.
it's all classified.
I just ripped it all down right before I turned it on.
So can you, I don't know how easy it is to aim. Can you give yourself less headroom?
Give myself less.
Yes. In other words, the space between the top of your head and the top of the frame, kind of
not max
reduce
headroom,
it.
mini
Yeah.
headroom.
There you go. That's better.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Should
can see
be.
your boobies.
His moobs.
I was gonna say you can see my empty dog bed back there that my dog just
Oh,
vacated.
is that where you sleep when you're in trouble?
No, but my younger son really likes it.
Does he?
Oh, not the dog bed, the dog house. I'm getting these terms confused. Sorry. Who's in the dog house?
Woof, woof, woof.
I am. Well, that's one good thing about not being married.
There's no
Not
dog
in-
house.
Not in the dog house anymore.
You're not in the basement anymore.
No, I'm actually on ground level. I can
I
actually
know.
see the
You can
street
see the
and
daylight and
people
everything.
walking by and yeah, the sun shining.
Way to go.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Jilly's in
Okay.
the doghouse.
Uh-oh.
Jilly's in the
Is she?
doghouse?
Why? What did she
Yeah.
do wrong?
She drove through a large pothole and grounded the front of my TT.
Oh no.
Oh.
Yeah, and wrecked the paintwork.
Well, that's
Oh.
the local authorities' problem, not hers. Hi, Greg.
Okay. I'm sure Nick feels the same way. Exactly.
Hey, Greg, are you okay with us sharing your news on the show? I did send you a note back.
Yeah, I communicated with him as well,
Oh, all right.
and we'll see what he says. I'm sure that's okay.
Just wanted to be sure.
Yeah. So Micah and Mike Kuipers and anyone else there, Brad,
Neil.
and Neil, how are the mic levels? I was a little
Thanks, Greg.
too hot,
Just too hot for words.
just too
Jeff.
hot.
Too damn hot.
Yeah, how's my mic level?
Perfect.
Yeah, you just stay back there. Oh, I did send
I'm
one
being
back,
a
but
Canadian today.
I don't know. Sometimes the email that's here don't work so well, Greg. So maybe you didn't
It's
get one.
Canadians. You can't rely on their
No,
technology.
no.
My brother's a Canadian. How weird is
I'm
that?
sorry.
That
I
is
know, so am I.
that is weird. That your brother's a different.
Nationality. I mean, he
Yeah.
was born in Australia. He was
So he's
Became
twice removed
British.
from you. Even weirder.
I know, and now he's lived in Canada so long, he's become naturalized. Not that there's anything.
What a
natural
lucky
about
man.
Being a Canadian.
Does that? I assume that you have to take a test up there, Liz.
Oh yeah,
So it's not. I can't just
yeah.
move
It
up
doesn't
there
just
in-
happen.
in 40 years.
Gotta let my dog.
Well, okay. What? But I guess if you want to just go, like the immigrants, you can go up there.
Oh yeah,
Become part
just
of their
not be a
country.
Canadian. Yeah.
Yeah. The illegals. All right. Let's see here. Air New Guinea. Is that New Guinea? Is that how you pronounce that? NIUGINI.
Tim
New
Benram
Guinea?
says, "My brother's a Canadian." Sounds like a country song.
My brother's a Canadian.
Liz, my question is, could you pass the
Well,
naturalization test?
that's funny you should say that because someone sent me one of the tests. I did okay, but I don't think. I mean, I think I could have passed it, but I sure there was some stuff on there that I was kind of like, oh, okay. No,
Yeah, it's pretty common knowledge, or I think it's a pretty commonly held belief that most Americans that are born in the United States citizens that are born here
yeah.
cannot pass it.
Oh yeah. They put some pretty obscure stuff on there, and probably stuff we learned in school or something. But
Yeah,
school's a long time ago for me.
Yeah.
This looks like a bit Mad Doggish, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those fucker
Pardon
100s.
me?
What? I'm sorry, did I say something wrong? It's a fucker.
fucker's on there, she's
I'm
saying.
sorry, Fokker 70.
It's funny you say that because when I looked at that picture, I was like, man, from the door back, it almost looks like a CRJ, but then you got that funny nose in the front.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a CRJ.
Nope.
Are we getting
I think,
ready to
by
go,
the way,
gentlemen?
it's New Guinea, as in a
New
sort
Guinea,
of
like New
yeah,
Guinea,
a local
like Papua
spelling
Yeah, I
New
agree.
Guinea.
I
Papua,
I
yeah.
got
Okay.
that after looking at it for a while. I thought, oh yeah, that's really saying New Guinea, isn't it?
Okay.
Hi,
Well,
Tony
that's
Smith.
that's the way I'll say it. Tony Smith, hey man. Neil Landworm, Tim Bam
Mount
Ram,
Hagen is where they get all the ice cream from.
Mount
they've got a
Hagen
mountain
Dazs.
Yeah, they've got a mountain of ice cream there.
And I'm going to pronounce it Hagen. Because I think that's the way you pronounce it. Mount Hagen.
We ready
Okay,
to go?
let me
everybody?
check Roger's sound level. Hey, Roger, give me a sound check.
You're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show.
Good.
The view from our side of the cockpit door.
That's good?
Sounds great.
Ew, good.
Roger's very busy with news in Manhattan today.
Ontario.
Did you sing that song when you crossed the border into Ontario last summer, Jeff?
Uh-huh.
I bet you did.
I did. I actually sang it at the border, and then they just kind of looked at me and they pulled me off to the side and gave me extra scrutiny.
Yes.
What's
So
wrong with this
everybody,
guy?
we're actually ended up. We're going to do two parts of this show recording today because Steffi's
Yeah, the
gotten
good
really.
part and the bad part.
Yeah, it's up to you to decide which is which.
TBD which this is. Anyway, Steffi's gotten really slammed at work, so we're going to do another part with her on Friday morning.
Yes.
Just so's you know. So we'll be doing about an hour and a half today and about an hour and a half with Steffi. That's the plan.
There you have it.
Okay, guys.
All right, so I am still recording.
Good. That's good.
Yep,
And-
so I've been recording for 11 and a half minutes. Huh?
I've been recording for 11:48, and we got that there, and
Oh, yeah, we've been talking about that, Micah. We're well aware of Rick's birthday.
yep. That's why he's here today to celebrate with.
Yeah,
Oh, wait, he's not.
exactly. That's why he made himself busy.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do it, I guess.
Let's do it.
All right. You know what, Liz? Leave it like that. I like. Yeah,
You
like,
it
that.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Oh, no, I can't pick my nose.
Yeah,
while we
just
do the
gonna say.
intro.
That's mainly why I have her do this. No, I think it's well. I mean, we can do it. We can do the
No,
normal
I think
thing.
it's good. I
Hi,
think
y'all.
it's
Yeah,
better.
I like.
think
I like
it's-
having all of us over there. Yeah,
Okay.
it's fun.
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show.
The view from our side of the cockpit door.
WAPG. It's the Airline Pilot Guy.
Airline Pilot Guy, episode 564.
Yeah, he's up in the sky. It's the Airline Pilot Guy.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from our side of the cockpit door. With your host, Captain Jeff, broadcasting live from Studio 1A at APG headquarters in Roswell, Georgia. Today's show is recorded on the 4th of April, 2023.
Yeah, he's up in the sky. It's the Airline Pilot Guy. It's your ride and he's flying by with the Airline Pilot Guy. Yeah.
In today's episode, a flight in Papua New Guinea loses cabin pressure, causing passenger injuries. Richard Branson's Virgin Orbit satellite launching business lays off most of its workers. More news and your feedback. So get all settled in. Tray tables and seat backs in the upright and locked positions. Electronic devices powered on. I'm Radio Roger. Flight 564 is ready for pushback.
You are Radio Roger, an award-winning TV and radio reporter currently at the number one all news station in the nation, 1010 Wins, on 92.3 FM in
New York City.
Welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show. It's an aviation podcast covering the latest in aviation news and answering your great feedback. I'm Captain Jeff, a pilot at a major legacy airline based somewhere in the U.S. of A. And joining me from across the pond in
Hartford, Hereford, and Hampshire.
professional photographer, former RAF, RAAF fighter pilot, retired Airbus A330, A340 captain for Virgin Atlantic Airways. It's Captain Nick.
Hi there, Jeff, and hi, everybody. Great to be back on, and it's going to be a good show, I've decided.
Oh, I'm glad it is. Any bad weather you getting from the United States of America?
Not today, no, it's been
Okay.
sunny.
Well, that's good to
You
hear.
must occasionally have good weather there.
Occasionally, we'll send you some good stuff. Also joining us from his home studio in the Air Capital, low and slow pilot, A&P mechanic, old airplane enthusiast, and engineer in the aerospace and defense industry. It's Nick Camacho.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be back. Looking forward to it.
All right. And also joining us from a place to stand in lots of snow, retired financier, aviation enthusiast, spreadsheet master, and our producer, Liz Piper.
Hi, everybody. All the snow has finally melted. I think we're on our way to spring now. I got my
Yay!
snow tires off yesterday, so
I've checked
Oh.
the power in your freezer, Liz. You don't want everything to melt.
Yeah, do you have to actually turn your refrigerator / freezer on during the wintertime up there, or just leave the door
I
open?
just throw it all outside on the patio.
Okay. Well,
Have a
that's
good
one of the
show,
advantages.
guys.
Okay.
Cheers.
See you, Liz. All right. Let's go ahead and do some aviation news. What do you think?
Stand by for news.
Now, we'll start right off from the news source Aviation Herald, avherald.com. An air... thank you. I practiced this even before we started the show. Air
got it
Niugini
right, too.
Fokker 70, registration Papa 2, Alpha November Tango, performing flight 188 from Port Moresby to Mount Hagen, Papua New Guinea, with 67 passengers and 4 crew, had been on approach to Mount Hagen, but could not land at Mount Hagen due to weather conditions, and returned to Port Moresby. Yeah, well, it's that country is very mountainous, Liz, and you have to know how to land on the top of a mountain. The aircraft climbed to flight level 310 en route, but suffered the loss of cabin pressure. The aircraft performed a relatively normal approach to Port Moresby, descending through 10,000 feet about 14 minutes after leaving flight level 310, landed on runway 14 left about 2 hours, 10 minutes past departure time. 4 passengers sustained serious, 18 passengers minor injuries. Papua New Guinea's PIC, that must be their investigatory agency, reported that they were informed about the occurrence only 2 days later and wrote, quote, on disembarking the aircraft at Jackson's airport, a passenger of the occurrence flight alerted Air Niugini's customer service that a few passengers from the flight were bleeding from the ears and the nose. Yee. On assessing the injured passengers, Air Niugini customer service then activated a response plan and had the injured passengers transported to Pacific International Hospital for further medical assessment. It was reported that a total of 22 persons were injured. 7 had serious injuries and were admitted. 6 were under review, and 9 were discharged from the hospital. On March 22nd, 2023, Papua New Guinea's AIC released their preliminary report summarizing the sequence of events. The co-pilot occupying the right seat was pilot flying. The pilot in command, who was in the left seat, was the pilot monitoring. Flight crew had decided to return to Jackson's after observing that the weather at Mount Hagen Airport, the planned destination, was not suitable for an approach and landing. The flight data recorder showed that the aircraft had originally departed from Jackson's airport at 14:07 local. The flight crew stated during an interview that they arrived overhead Mount Hagen Airport at 1500. The flight crew then reported on approach for landing into Mount Hagen Airport. They elected to maintain 8,000 feet above sea level and visually hold to the west of the airfield over the Mount Hagen Township due to the prevailing wind conditions in the circuit. The hold lasted for about 8 minutes. When interviewed, the flight crew stated that given the local wind conditions observed in the circuit during the hold, a safe landing was not possible, and therefore a decision was made to return to Jackson's airport. Recorded data showed that the aircraft climbed to a cruising altitude of 31,000 feet above mean sea level and began tracking back to Jackson's. About 100 nautical miles from Jackson's, the crew commenced their descent. The crew stated that a track deviation of 30 nautical miles right of track was required to keep clear of en route weather. Approaching 10,000 feet on descent into Jackson's, the crew actioned the Fokker 70 normal procedures before approach check. Flight crew stated that during the interview that they had subsequently noticed that the landing elevation setting had not been set for an arrival into Jackson's, but was instead still at about 5,500 feet, which they initially set for Mount Hagen Airport. The crew stated in an interview that since there was a need to increase the rate of pressurizing the cabin on descent, the Fokker 70 Quick Reference Handbook, Abnormal Procedures for Manual Cabin Pressurization Control procedure was executed. I guess they didn't want to wait for the automatic system to take care of it. Then they continued with the approach for landing into Jackson's airport via the ILS procedure for runway 14 left. The crew stated that once the aircraft was established on final approach, the cabin pressure differential indicated about 6 psid. That's still quite a lot. Just I think
the normal maximum before the safety valves blows about 8 psi.
Right.
That's you've got it well pumped up.
Yeah, I mean, normal cruise conditions, I think for most air transport aircraft, probably in the 7.5-ish range or something like that. As Nick mentioned, if you're going up pretty high, close to the service ceiling of the aircraft, anything approaching 8 is probably too high.
Yeah.
Or getting there anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 6 is significant. So let's see. They when they noticed it, seeing that the indication was above the maximum allowable cabin differential for landing, which is 0.13.
Yes.
The crew terminated the approach and initiated a go-around about 1,600 local time from 1,000 feet straight ahead over runway 14 left. Yep. The aircraft climbed a runway heading to 2,500 feet AGL and requested clearance from ATC to conduct a right turn to track and visually hold at 2,500 feet in the Daugo training area. ATC provided the clearance as requested by the crew. The aircraft established in this area, the crew reportedly actioned the QRH abnormal procedure for reduced cabin pressure differential procedure. That seems like the opposite of what they should have chosen, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you go for the not reduced, but increased cabin pressure differential procedure?
Well, I'd have thought so, but yeah.
Sometimes pressurization can kind of be confusing. It really
can actually. Yeah, it's not logical, or doesn't appear logical.
No, anytime you're in a situation where you have to manually control the pressurization and not let the auto system work, it's dangerous.
Yeah,
it's like
really got to think about it.
Yeah. Okay. So they reportedly conducted a normal approach, landed on runway 14 left at 16:20 local time. The crew taxied to the parking bay where the engines were shut down. A normal disembarkation procedure was followed and all passengers disembarked, which is normal. According to customer services duty officers' statements provided to the AIC, 4 passengers were reported to have sustained serious injuries, 18 minor injuries for all crew, and the remaining 45 passengers. No injuries were reported. The injuries were reported to have been sustained during flight operations at Jackson's aerodrome area as a result of a sudden pressurization event. Okay, time for analysis. Captain Nick, what the heck were they doing? What did they do wrong here? I mean, I know we don't know for sure because it's just the initial
It all
report.
comes from the diversion, doesn't it? Because having set their airport elevation for where they intend to land at 5,500 feet, if they'd landed there, the automatic system would have been fine. And when they landed, the pressure inside the cabin and the pressure outside the cabin would have been the same, and all would have been good. But now they've decided not to land there, which is a good decision.
Mm-hmm.
But when you divert, you've got to remember, amongst all the other things that you have to do when you divert, or basically this time return to the original, is to make sure you set that airfield elevation knob, or in the case of an Airbus, it's just that it's the altitude of your destination airport. So you must make sure that your destination airport is now that your new destination back to Port Moresby. And then the automatic system will adjust for that new altitude. Because they hadn't done that, so that as they were coming towards Port Moresby and they were on the descent, the pressurization system was still trying to keep the cabin pressurized as if they were landing halfway up a mountain at their original destination, Mount Dusthagen.
Or Hagen-Dazs.
Oh, Hagen-Dazs. Damn, I got that wrong.
It's funnier when you say it in that order.
Mount Hagen-Dazs, yes, exactly right. So they ended up with this mismatch. They spotted it, which was great. And because, if they'd landed, the doors for the pressurization system would have been driven fully open, and they'd have dumped that huge amount of pressure. And that probably would have been even worse than what did happen. So they now are in the situation where they're going to manually bring the cabin pressure down to one that equals more or less sea level where they're going to land. So they've got a, I don't know quite how you do it in this airplane, because we would just adjusted the automatics through the flight computers. So I don't know quite. I'm assuming they had either they manually moved the new airport elevation, or they manually moved the dump valves that regulate the pressure in the cabin. Whatever they did it a bit fast. You've got to let that pressure come slowly down, because when their passengers have been at altitude, every little space inside, particularly I'm pointing to my head because that's where the most painful bits are. Every little space inside your head, and you've got lots of them. All your sinuses are little air spaces. Your inner ear around your eardrum, there are air spaces either side of that eardrum. They've all got to be equalized. You've got to allow some time for that pressure to gently equalize. Otherwise, things tend to give way. Your sinuses suddenly become very painful, and they can bleed quite badly, and you risk bursting an eardrum, which can be extremely painful. And by the sounds of it, that might have been what happened to some people. People who don't fly regularly would not be as familiar as we as pilots are with the Valsalva maneuver, which is where you force air through the back of your nose into your ears, inner ears, down the eustachian tubes by holding your nose and blowing against the pressure and forcing air down there. And that's what you do if you're a pilot to quickly equalize the pressure either side of your eardrum. They probably wouldn't have known how to do that. You can get around it by swallowing. It's not as efficient, but works. Chewing. That's why you get boiled sweets on airplanes sometimes. Not just to choke on, to make you swallow and help equalize the pressure.
Boiled sweets? What?
Boiled sweets, yes.
Oh, hard candy. Oh, okay. I'd never heard that
candy.
term before. Okay.
Okay, well, that's what we call them.
I thought we were talking about that Gujia stuff from India, the holy festival that we talked about on the last show. I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, it looks like they whatever they did with their manual actions, they did it a bit fast and changed that pressure too fast for their passengers to cope with. So not good. Not
Yeah.
good.
So
And what's more, I didn't think they voluntarily put in an accident report. I have a feeling they just kind of carried on regardless.
Maybe nobody will notice.
Yeah. Yes. But luckily, the ground service agent saw these bleeding passengers as they dripped off the airplane.
Well, I don't know. It could be
Help
normal,
them to
Liz,
a hospital.
if you're not very good at controlling pressurization, like on a regular basis.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's very easy to actually do it the wrong way, and pump more air in instead of letting air out. Or in this case, the cabin would have been at lower pressure than the sea level, so you've got to let air out.
Yep.
Yeah, the confusing part that they're talking about is as you go up in altitude, the pressure goes down, right? So you need your delta pressure to go up as you go up in altitude, and the atmospheric pressure comes down to maintain an equivalent pressure of 8,000 feet or whatever the cabin sustains.
Did you say something? Did you say delta P?
He did, delta P.
Very good.
The bell.
We have the box checked for this episode. Delta P procedure complete. So while you were explaining all this, Captain Nick, I thought, Jeff, you should probably search for the Fokker 70 QRH and the procedure for manual depressurization. And that's what I did. And I found, I don't know if this is official or not, but it looks official. And abnormal procedures for manual cabin pressurization control. Now, I don't think that's what they referred to. They do have a manual depressurization procedure, even though the wording in the narrative of the Aviation Herald report was different because the crew had said that they actioned the reduced cabin pressure differential procedure, which doesn't even seem to make any sense to me when I say it.
I think the first one they did was the abnormal procedures for manual cabin pressurization control procedure.
So in this procedure, if you want to climb, then you put the manual control lever up, and then the manual rate control as required. This sounds very much like the Mad Dog system. We had a like a wheel, almost like a trim wheel over there on the right side that we could move to open and close the valve manually. There's actually cables that go all the way back to the back of the airplane, and you're actually opening up and closing a door manually. Now, normally the auto system uses that configuration with the pulleys and the cables and everything. Hey, don't laugh. It works.
It sounds like
of
a
the time.
C-47 set that's not pressure.
I know. So it's probably very similar to the C-47 actually. And then, but if you anyway, so that's if you climb, you want to go manual control lever up, and then if you're doing a descent, the manual control lever, I'm saying lever and lever down, manual rate control is required. You can adjust the rate of climb or descent on the manual rate control. And then when the cabin altitude reaches landing altitude, manual control lever mid position. And then before landing, manual control lever up, which I assume is just completely opening up the outflow valve completely. And now you're just at ambient pressure, which is what the auto system would have done for you if it was working. The manual depressurization procedure is a little bit different. It says initiate descent to 10,000 feet. And then the pressurization control manual, and then the manual control lever up, and then you adjust the manual rate control as well. And when the cabin altitude reaches 9,000 feet, then you put the manual control lever back to the mid position, blah, blah, blah. So in other words, that last 10,000 feet, until if you're landing at sea level, everything should just basically equalize, and hopefully nobody's ears and noses are bleeding. So once in a few years back when I was still flying the Mad Dog, taking off out of Atlanta and going through about 10,000 feet, like right away, it was just like something didn't feel right, especially if you fly a lot. You know what it's supposed to feel like. And when anything is going on with a pressurization system, and I'm sure Captain Nick will go, yeah, you immediately sense something's going on with the pressure. You immediately look at your pressurization panel and your pressurization schematic if you have that kind of a system with fancy screens as I do now. But the Mad Dog didn't have any of that, and so I told the first officer, I said, I'm going to level at 10. I'm going to talk to air traffic control and let them know we're going to stop our climb because we have a pressurization system issue, and I want you to get the checklist out for that, and I want you to start managing the pressurization in the manual mode. Oh my gosh. I mean, like, I don't know why my nose and ears didn't start bleeding, because I think he was doing the opposite of what he was supposed to be doing. So he was actually, closing the outflow valve instead of going the other way and trying to equalize, I finally got to the point where I couldn't stand it anymore. And I said, okay, whatever his name was, I don't remember who I was flying with. I said, you have the airplane. This is what we're doing. Stay here at this altitude, get vectors back to the airport. I'm going to take over the manual pressurization. And it was not easy to do, but at least I was going in the correct direction to equalize the pressure and open up the outflow valve and everything else. But it was not a lot of fun at all. That's one of those things where if that happens to, and we have most of the airplanes I've flown, there's like 2 automatic pressurization controller. So if one stops and then the next one takes over for it, but if they both stop, obviously now you're in a manual pressurization situation. And to me, that's like emergency procedure. You don't want to do. You never want to take an airplane. I mean, I'll refuse an airplane if neither of the auto pressurization system controllers are working. I'm just not going to do it. It's just too much liability, in my opinion, that I'm going to break people's eardrums in the back. And they normally don't. That in that situation would probably be a ferry flight without passengers if they were purposely dispatching you like that. But anyway, just wanted to share my little experience with manual pressurization. And I mean, it's like of all the things that could go wrong with an airplane, and that gives me the heebie-jeebies the most is manual pressurization. That's just like, all right, Brad says this crew was under a lot of pressure.
Oh, dear.
Oh, wait,
Very
I should have
good.
had my rim shot ready. There we go.
And Super Fred blew his student's sinuses out.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's no good. I've heard of stories where people have had sinus lockups or blockages or whatever, and they actually had to do the obviously the medical version of a drill bit, like right into your sinus cavity to
Back and
relieve the
back
pressure.
Yep.
Ugh. Yeah.
Yeah, not pleasant.
Okay. A control room is telling us to skip the next item. And so we are going to see, unless we want to say anything else. And Nick C., do you want to add or subtract anything about the pressurization incident?
No, just wanted to reiterate how confusing it was when you started reading that procedure out of their QRH.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not logical how you're moving around the controls. So
yeah, it's almost like
it's
like the opposite of what you. So he's like, okay, I want to go this direction with it, and you think, okay, that's a climb, but no, it's not a climb. It's a descent. It's
right.
It's
And
to wrap your head around it. It's like
you look at it, and like to climb, it says manual control lever up, and so you would think as you're climbing, you're closing a valve, right, to maintain more pressure,
right,
and then descending, control lever down or open. But then before landing, you put the manual control lever in the climb position, basically. So, yeah, super confusing.
Yeah, it is. It honestly is. And I think the airplane on the Mad Dog, I think we had to remember to reset the altitude for wherever we're going to land. And in the airplane I'm flying now, the 717, it's like what Nick was saying with the FMS. When you put in the divert airport information, then it automatically sends that information to the autocontroller, and it takes care of all that stuff. and you just kind of
but
keep your
we
fingers
still
crossed.
have to do a manual check on the screens
Yeah.
that the airport elevation is correct for the airport we're about to land at to make sure that we've got the right data in. So it's just one of the additional checks we do on the approach.
And a lot of most of the places we fly, and probably the same with you, Nick. The landing elevations are probably not that significantly different, and
Correct.
there are times when you like when you land, and all of a sudden your ears start like changing rapidly. You go, what the heck? Obviously something the autocontroller didn't have the right altitude information. We forgot to do something probably, but it just kind of opened up the valve, and then everything equalized, and you go, okay. Well, let's don't do that again. Okay. Item C, final report. This is, again, from the Aviation Herald. Network Australia Fokker 100. Another Fokker. Registration Victor Hotel, November Hotel Victor, performing flight 1616 from Perth in Western Australia to Paraburdoo. How do you say that, Nick? Paraburdoo? Paraburdoo?
Will it either be Paraburdoo or Paraburdoo?
Paraburdoo. Okay. Also in Western Australia. Paraburdoo.
Try saying
What,
it with
Liz?
an Australian accent. Sorry.
I can't. I don't know how to. Oh, okay. That sounds good.
Paraburdoo? Yeah,
Ah.
that's probably it. I wouldn't know, but that sounds
Okay.
good.
Well, anyway, this Fokker 100 had 92 passengers, 5 crew. They were on approach to Paraburdoo.
That's
runway.
an Indian accent.
I know. I'm sorry. I cannot do an Australian accent. I really cannot. Okay. From the P Airport's runway 6, but went around at 7:44 local time. The aircraft climbed to 5,000 feet, positioned for an approach to runway 24, but again needed to go around. So they came in at first runway 6, and then their second shot was runway 24, and then the aircraft climbed to 4,000 feet, attempted another approach to runway 6, but again they needed to go around the third time. The aircraft climbed to 6,500 feet, positioned for an approach to runway 24, and continued to landing at 8:44. So what's the problem? They, at minimums, they couldn't see anything that they were required to see, like the runway approach lights or anything.
Ouch.
So no visual contact had been established. The Australian Transportation Safety Bureau reported that during a fourth attempt at an instrument approach at Paraburdoo Airport, and something too, the flight crew continued the descent below the approach minima before becoming visual and landing. As part of the investigation, the ATSB interviewed the flight crew, reviewed cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder data, operating procedures, flight planning information, etc. The occurrence was rated a serious incident and is being investigated, and they're expecting a report the third quarter of 2022. Well, here we are. It's probably the first quarter of 2023. This happened, by the way, November 22nd of 2021. And the final report has been issued. Contributing factors, the flight crew lost confidence in their flight plan weather forecast after 2 missed approaches. I probably would have lost confidence before the 2 missed approaches, but they're really not confident. Without immediate access to actual weather information, they elected to conduct further approaches instead of diverting. After the third missed approach, the flight crew had insufficient fuel to divert to a suitable airport and were committed to landing in conditions below landing minimums due to the continuing deteriorating cloud base. The actual weather conditions encountered by the flight crew on arrival at Paraburdoo Airport were worse than the flight plan forecast, obviously, below landing minima and deteriorating. This event was difficult to forecast accurately due to the lack of observed lower cloud, satellite imagery, and meteorological modeling limitations. The aircraft was not fitted with an operational aircraft communications addressing and reporting system, ACARS. So I guess they normally have one, but this wasn't not working. They were out of range of the Mikathara Automatic En Route Information Service while holding at Paraburdoo Airport. Therefore, the flight crew were reliant on air traffic control to assess the actual weather information for the alternate aerodromes. Anyway, Network Aviation, the company, the airline, I guess, operator of this, did not provide their flight crew with a diversion decision-making procedure for the circumstances where their flights encountered unforecast weather below landing minima. This increased the risk that the flight crew would not anticipate and be adequately prepared for a diversion. Network Aviation did not include the threat of unforecast weather below landing minima in their controlled flight into terrain risk assessments. This increased the risk that controls required to maintain this threat would not be developed, monitored, and reviewed at a management level. So this is a safety issue they are calling out. The flight crew did not convey a sense of urgency to air traffic control when they requested the actual weather information for Newman Airport, which is, I guess, their diversion airport. This, combined with the controller's workload at the time, resulted in a delay of about 15 minutes before the information was offered. However, Newman Airport had a holding fuel requirement that the flight could not comply with, and as the actual weather did not include an improvement of conditions, it's unlikely that this information would have influenced their decision to divert. Okay, anyway. So when they first came in, they attempted a landing on, runway 6, I think they started out. And then I think they noticed that there was a little bit of a tailwind, and they actually did get a little glimpse of the runway at that point, but they were not in a position to continue a normal descent and a safe landing. So they made the right decision and they went around. So the second time, the reason why they came back the other direction was that, okay, now they're going to be aligned with the wind. It's going to be a little bit safer. However, the weather was as bad or worse going into that direction. So, looks like, if you're wondering, how low did they go? How low did they go? And I believe it said just under 300 feet, 297, I think. I remember the numbers.
293.
93.
With a minimum descent altitude on that runway, our decision height was 584.
Wow.
So
a couple hundred feet below.
Yeah.
And this is an ILS approach, right? Or was it a...
Well, minimum descent altitude, that'll be a non-precision approach, I would
non-precision
guess.
approach. So they were basically doing their own kind of like descent procedure once they went below the minimum descent altitude. And that's pretty dicey. But I think at this point they really didn't, they gotten themselves into a corner, and they had to do this. Otherwise just go find some place to crash, so they had to try to get the airplane on the ground, right?
Yeah, they'd worked themselves into a corner. They had to break the regulations and go below their minima because that was the only alternative course of action. It's an interesting one, this one, because you do ask yourself, just because the weather at my destination airfield isn't as forecast, what about the weather forecast for all the other airfields that I am considering, basically my diversion airfields? They said they lost confidence in the forecast. Well, these airports are quite a long way apart, and I'm wondering if that is justified. And particularly when they say, well, we haven't got ACARs. Well, you've got an air traffic controller there, and if you declare you've got a problem, if I don't get I need a decent weather forecast because I'm getting close to fuel minimums. The guy will drop what he's doing and try and sort you out. He's got a telephone. That's all he needs. Their number one diversion, or their primary diversion, was actually quite wide open. I saw the forecast somewhere in this. It's a really long report, this, and it was about 10 miles and 10,000 feet, cloud and visibility. So it was pretty much, wide open. So, and they could have made the decision up to and including going around twice, because that's when they sort of reached the fuel that they would have to go after their diversion. Once they committed themselves to a third approach in conditions that were getting progressively worse, they had committed themselves to the airfield they were at then. They couldn't then divert. So there you go.
Yeah, I think they said that had they initiated the divert after their second miss, they would have had sufficient fuel. But once they committed to that third approach, they basically said, yeah, okay, it's over, game over. You're going to have to try to land here.
Yeah.
Let's see, I was going to share. I was just kind of curious. I'm thinking, well, I don't really know. I know where Perth is in Western Australia, but I don't know where that other place is.
Parabadoo is about it's north of them by halfway up Australia.
Well, let me show you. I'm
Oh,
going to share
thanks.
it with you. Yeah, let's. If I'm wondering, and then I'm sure that others out there might want to know.
then
And
I
so
think
there we go.
Parabadoo.
Now that's the
There
road
go.
you would take. Obviously, I'm using Google Maps,
was gonna
so I don't think they'd
were
take
they-
that flight
were they
path.
Drunk these pilots. It's a funny old flight track.
Well, it was just the first thing that came to my mind when, like, how do
No,
I
no,
figure
that's-
this out? I
that's
just went to
fine.
Google Maps. Of course, it's normally used to me driving and not flying.
Yeah,
Actually,
and I
there
think
is
their primary diversion, which was Karatha, I think is
Where's that?
north on the coast, underneath the campgrounds. Little button there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's where that one is.
Oh, even further north.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they do go at some length into the conditions that cause the deteriorating weather at their destination, Parabadoo. And they go into some length, and it went straight over my head. And I know a bit about Met, but not a lot. And they really did have a weird situation there. So whether it wasn't like there was a huge front going through that was going to hit all the airfields around them. I think it was a problem particular to their destination. Their other airfield was on the coast in a completely different type of air mass. But anyway, the fact was they got away with it, didn't they? They made a good approach. When they came out of cloud, they could see the runway. They were at the right height. So they actually, when it comes to piloting skills, I think they did a really good job. It takes me back to the simulator I flew when I was being assessed for the command course to become a captain. And I ended up doing a similar sort of thing. I was doing a 2-engine approach in a 4-engine airplane into Boston with no air traffic control, at least no radar. Everything was procedural, and they'd given me an NDB approach because all the ILSs were broken. It was one of those really realistic scenarios I ended up. So I was doing an NDB approach on only 2 engines. The 2-engine committal height for that is 500 feet, and the minima was a little below that. So I couldn't see the runway at the 2-engine committal height, so I committed to land. And when I got to the decision height, or MDA, I couldn't see the runway. So what do you do then?
just hold on, hold on to your hats.
Assessment. Yeah, exactly right. That's exactly what I did. I held on, and 100 feet later, I saw the airfield and we landed. So, that was okay. And the guy raised his eyebrows, but I passed, so that's fair enough.
Okay, well, that's
So,
all that you need.
Exactly. Sometimes, as a captain, rules are for when you don't have an emergency.
Suckers. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. When you're in an emergency situation, you're perfectly permitted to throw all the rules out the window and do what you think is best to get the airplane safely on the ground.
Now, please tell me that both engines were out on the same side, were they?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh,
I've just
man.
been through a 4-engine flame out, which is another really realistic thing that happens to
These
you.
people are evil.
Yeah, and he'd only given me 2 engines back when they were both on the same side. Anyway,
Yeah.
by the by.
Well, yes, well done, Captain. Well done.
Well, I wasn't fishing for compliments, but I was just saying there are times when it is justified, and
Yes.
if you're going to do it, make sure you do it carefully, like these guys did. So,
Got a comment from Brad, the Sultan of Wings. Crikey!
is that an Australian accent? That was very good.
Yeah.
Crikey.
Crikey! Okay, well, as you said, they got the airplane on the ground safely, but there were definitely some mistakes made, and they did the best with their situation.
I think their decision-making process a little earlier on when they had some gas probably could have been polished a bit.
Speaking of gas, whew, I don't know what I ate for lunch. Let's see. I was trying to make that into some kind of a segue, but it's not really working at all because there's nothing here in our news that has anything to do with gas. But anyway, shall I continue, Liz? Okay. All right. D and F. Okay. D, another aviationherald.com article. Final report. HOP, HOP exclamation point, Canadair HOP, CRJ 1000 on, I've never heard of a CRJ 1000. Must be bigger than the 900, huh? On behalf of Air France, registration Foxtrot Hotel Mike Lima Delta, performing flight 1632 from Lyon to Nantes, France. Nantes, gosh darn it, I thought I had it. Was on approach to Nantes runway 21 when ATC cleared the aircraft to descend to 3,000 feet at QNH 1002 hectopascals. The crew, however, read back 1021, descended to 3,000 feet on that QNH, the in error one, and continued the approach. Subsequently, a minimum safe altitude warning, an MSAW, activated. The crew corrected and continued for a safe landing on runway 21. The excuse me, the French. Why is it not working? Okay, hang on. The French
Bureau d'enquête et d'analyse
said that this was a serious incident and opened an investigation on the 31st of March 2023. I mean, literally just a couple of days ago. The final report was released. You are Liz. You're on it. Liz, I think she's connected directly to all these investigation databases, and she gets. You're serving on each committee. Wow, I didn't realize. And you probably have like notifications on your phone that ring when you get the. Okay. Anyway, let's see what the final report says. The following factors may have contributed to the altimeter setting error: a high workload, and the crew being excessively focused on the weather conditions associated with the ongoing storm, probably one of those storms that came over from the United States, to the detriment of the application of the standard procedure, which included checking the consistency of the QNH value provided by the ATC against another source of information. The approach controller being distracted due to an imminent conflict in another sector of his area of responsibility for which he was preparing the resolution. As a consequence, the controller did not identify that the crew incorrectly read back the altimeter setting. Ding, that's important. The following factors may have contributed to the non-detection of the erroneous final path: the inherent limitations of the Baro VNAV function in the event of an altimeter setting error, the absence of appropriate safety measures in such situations, in particular the consistency check procedure based on the radio altimeter value, appears to be ineffective given the operational context at this point of the flight. Now, just an aside, the radio altimeter for most airplanes that I've flown doesn't really activate until about 2,500 feet above the ground. So, if the radio altimeter is active, then, you can do that consistency check. But if you're above it, you don't really know if that's a good value or not. Greg Peterson says, I know that what QNH is, but what does QNH stand for? Captain Nick.
It's a Q code. It doesn't stand for anything. It is literally a code that means altimeter setting that gives your height above sea level.
Yeah, probably. I would imagine. Doesn't it stand for something? Because I know like QFE is field elevation is what.
I think they might have tried to give it something like that.
It's probably some French words that we just don't understand.
Google says it stands for Q nautical height, which means indicating altitude at height above sea level.
Yeah. Wow.
I've heard people give an awful lot of sort of mnemonics of trying to remember
Oh, but it's not really true.
QFE is and QNH is, and there's a Q code for standard altimeter setting. I can't remember what that one is. Someone help me out. But anyway,
standard. Yeah, I've forgotten to. QNE.
Oh, that sounds good. That
sounds right.
useful.
I don't know.
There's also a Q code for a Metman's pressure setting, which is more accurate than QNH. So there are a number of these ones. Now, most of them have fallen out of use, but they all did exist. And there were so many of them, they couldn't really match the letters with a logical phrase.
Yeah, stand by.
But you can use
control room,
QNH nautical height if you want.
Control room. Would you please kick out Greg Peterson from the live audience, asking us questions in the middle of the show that we don't know the answer to? It's not fair.
If NH stands for nautical height, what's the Q stand for?
Queen's nautical height.
That's got to be
use it over here.
Oh my! You know what? We're going to get a lot of feedback now.
Yeah.
Query? Not like query, just to be sure that you don't think I'm saying something inappropriate. Okay. I don't know. Let's get. I think we've gone into sunk into a rabbit hole, and we need to pull ourselves.
Rabbit holes.
Yeah, it's Greg. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah.
Why is he still there, Liz? Okay. I'm just kidding. Don't kick him out. I don't know. What else do we want to say about this? I know there's more to read.
That for each millibar of pressure you get wrong, you're going to have an error of about 30 feet as a rule of thumb. So they had 19 millibars error.
19 high.
So 10 would be about 300 feet. 19 would be about 560, 570 feet.
And this says 530 feet.
Error.
Yeah, on the
530. Yeah, okay.
530.
30 foot is only an approximation, but it's a nice round
number. That's no good. You're 530 feet lower than you think you are.
Yes, and that's the big that's the big
Yeah.
point. If you try and make an approach flying 530 feet lower than you should, and you don't find the correction, you don't spot it on the radar, you're going to hit the ground about 2 miles short of the runway.
That's when the radio altimeter really comes into play.
Yes, it does. What's the radio altimeter like on the C-47, Nick?
Do you have one?
No, I think it's just our iPad.
They just use like a can with a string on the end of it. And they put some rocks in it, give it some weight.
Hang the navigator out on a rope.
I was going to say, we have the big HF antenna flying out the back. If that starts dragging on the ground, we're probably in trouble.
Oh, yeah. Brad sees a trend occurring here. Another crew under pressure.
Oh, yeah. Lots of pressure.
Definitely under pressure.
If the Network Australia flight would have just combined this air with their air, they would have just been able to make a perfectly acceptable approach on their first try. They would have
there you go.
Runway.
Good point.
30 feet lower than they should have been.
We're not recommending this, though. Please don't take us the wrong way. We're not recommending that you do that.
Interestingly, the report has a bit of a go at the air traffic controller because he is in his regulations. He is required to listen to and check a readback to be absolutely certain that the numbers he gave the pilots were read back correctly. And of course, he didn't do that. So he was really under the hammer here. But on the other hand, when we do an instrument rating, they always ensure that we're at some point in the instrument rating, we go above transition altitude so that we set standard pressure setting on our altimeter and then come back down below it to make sure that we remember to set QNH on our altimeters again, or you'll fail your instrument rating. That one action you've forgotten, you'll fail. I know I have failed one. for doing exactly that. Anyway, so the pilots are not off the hook here. It's just that, of course, the air traffic regulations are written in stone, and they are exactly that. They're a sort of legal regulation, whereas for the pilot, it's in this circumstance they give him a slightly easier time, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I keep referring to some feedback that deals with readbacks from Greg Peterson. Okay, let's go ahead and eliminate that one again. Also, no, just kidding. That's a good one. So this is another example of proper communications and listening to what other people are saying. When you tell them something, you should not just expect them to say exactly what you told them, but you should actually listen to make sure that they got it right. So, so we have a discussion here with the control room. She's wondering, Nick C, have you had a chance to look at the item with the Mooney in our
yeah, a
news?
little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to cover that, or do you want to save that for when I do it with Steph?
It's up to you. We can talk about it if you want.
Okay. Why don't we do that then? The item is E, final report on a Minnesota Mooney crash. And let's see, NTSB issued the final report for the fatal accident involving Mooney M20M, November 9156 Zulu. So that's a different one than the picture that we're showing here. But it's the same type. And it occurred on August 7th, 2021 in Victoria, Minnesota.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
They stuck that tail on backwards.
I know.
What have they done that for?
I think it was a mistake that somebody made, and then after they did it, they thought, "Hey, it doesn't look so bad. We like that look. It's going to set us apart from all the other aircraft manufacturers."
Certainly does.
No, I think that it was actually purposely designed that way, and Nick C could probably tell us why.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
I mean, it's not actually swept forward, right? It gives the illusion of being swept forward, but it's the leading edge is normal to the fuselage, and then just the trailing edge sweep makes it look like it's swept forward. And I think it was mostly just a marketing thing. Like, it made it a very distinguished appearance.
Well, okay.
To any other airplane. Right.
Absolutely. I mean, anytime you see that kind of tail, you're going, that's a Mooney. I mean, it's kind of clever, marketing.
It's kind of funny. You see sweeped and swoopy surfaces, then people associate those with fast and high performance. But then you can get like a 182 with a fairly raked back vertical tail surface sitting next to a Mooney, and that 182 is going to have a fat wing and struts. It's got strutted wings and fixed landing gear, but it's got this fast looking tail, right? And then this Mooney has this swept forward tail that everyone thinks is contrary to high performance, but it's an incredibly fast and efficient airplane.
Yeah, it really is.
And this bloke Mooney, he ran some kind of cult church, didn't he?
Well, I don't think that's the same Mooney.
Oh, okay. All right.
The Korean
dude every week.
Yeah. All right, let me read this. The pilot and two passengers, one of whom was a student pilot, departed on a personal flight. The pilot was cleared by ATC to fly an instrument landing system approach, an ILS approach in instrument meteorological conditions, IMC. About 10 miles from the runway, while on final approach, the airplane slowed to 80 knots, tracked left of the approach course, accelerated to about 140 knots, and descended about 300 feet. The airplane subsequently turned right and descended below the designated altitude for the approach, which triggered a low altitude alert that the controller transmitted and the pilot acknowledged. The airplane then abruptly turned left and entered a steep descent. The airplane continued in a left-turning spiral and descended below an overcast ceiling. The airplane subsequently impacted the ground upright about 8 miles west of the destination airport. Both wings and the right stabilizer were deflected upward in a vertical position. No pre-accident mechanical failures or malfunctions were found with the airframe and engine that would have precluded normal operation. The airplane debris on the ground, the left horizontal stab, left elevator, and part of the main wing spar upper cap splice plate showed that an in-flight breakup occurred during the final seconds of flight. So the performance study for this accident revealed that the airplane exceeded its maximum positive load factor during the spiral descent. As the airplane descended below the overcast, a rapid ground speed increase and heading change occurred, which were consistent with the pilot or possibly the student pilot attempting to recover the airplane from a nose-low attitude after seeing the ground. The spiral descent and attempted recovery overstressed the airplane, which caused the in-flight breakup. While the pilot was flying the final approach, several of his radio transmissions to air traffic control were either delayed or disjointed, indicating that the pilot was task saturated. The performance study showed that when the airplane made the series of turns while on final approach, erratic altitude and airspeed fluctuations occurred. These airspeed and altitude fluctuations and the tight spiraling turn that began afterward were consistent with the pilot becoming spatially disoriented due to the lack of visual references while the airplane was operating in IMC. The pilot's spatial disorientation led to his loss of airplane control. A friend of the accident pilot stated that the pilot had adopted an instrument flying habit in the Mooney airplane that involved making turns on approach primarily with the rudder and adjusting pitch attitude with the pitch trim. If the pilot controlled the airplane in such a manner during the accident flight, especially in response to the controller's low altitude alert, the application of rudder could have exacerbated the pilot's erratic airplane control inputs while on approach. The pilot's electronic logbook did not show any logged instrument approach procedures in 2021, and the accident pilot did not fly with his usual safety pilot during 2021. The pilot's last flight review in October of 2020 did not include any instrument approach procedures. Neither the safety pilot nor the accident pilot's flight instructor knew whether the accident pilot had flown with another safety pilot to log instrument time. As a result, the investigation was unable to determine if the accident pilot met the FAA's regulatory requirements for instrument experience. A drug, diphenhydramine, commonly marketed as Benadryl, was detected in the pilot's liver and heart tissue. No blood specimen was available to assess therapeutic levels. Diphenhydramine causes sedation and can slow psychomotor responses and reaction times, which can contribute to susceptibility, there we go, to spatial disorientation. However, without a diphenhydramine blood level, the investigation was unable to determine whether the effects of the pilot's use of Benadryl, I'll say, contributed to this incident or accident. So I do have, it's kind of hard to look at it, some video of, was from a security camera. And let me add that to the stream. And at a certain point, I'll stop it and then kind of go through frame by frame, but I'll run it in normal time or normal frame rate or whatever. Boom. Okay, it just fell out of the sky and a big fireball. And so let's just back it up a little bit, and you can see it coming into frame right. Well, I thought there was one frame before that, but I'm having trouble controlling it to that degree. But you can see right there, the airplane is kind of in a nose up attitude, as if, they were attempting to, pull up before they hit the ground. But you can see that the wings are not in their normal position. If you'll remember the photo that Liz had shown earlier of the airplane in its normal condition, those wings, both left and right, are completely folded upward. And let's see if I can move to the next frame, if there's any other, and that's when it actually hits the ground. And then it continues to basically turn into a big fireball. So, Nick, what's your analysis or input on this? Nick C.
Well, I think obviously there's a couple of different points that they kind of made there. The primary one being that it seems like he had he had a kind of preconceived or he flew the airplane in kind of an abnormal way, right? Like for the most part, when people are learning to fly instruments and are flying in IMC conditions, it's really kind of having a stabilized approach and being very stable and very coordinated is important, right? Because of these issues with your senses and how your senses reference the motion of the airplane. And I just think about like myself, my experience, which I'm not an instrument pilot, so I am always able to see the ground. In the history of my flying experience, I've always been able to see the ground. But when you start moving the airplane in an uncoordinated fashion, even on purpose, right? So when I'm flying the Luscombe, oftentimes we'll slip the airplane to manage energy, and that's a very common uncoordinated maneuver. But it's still it has a significant effect on your senses and how you are perceiving the motion of your body versus the actual motion of the airplane, right? So it seems like he kind of got himself set up for a poor situation, and then whether or not, I think they said that they could not confirm whether or not he was current, but I think it's just kind of one of those things where as you become less and less current and then less and less proficient, you start stacking those things on top of it, right? If he was a pilot who flew regularly and was used to being in the clouds, he may have had a little bit tighter scan. He may have had a little bit better understanding of his physiological, the things that were happening within his sensory system. But then as you look at the things that he started stacking up, he possibly hadn't flown as often in IMC or kept his currency up. He had this drug in his system that is pretty well known to affect response time and how your kind of brain system works. And it seems like he just got himself in a bad situation. Then obviously the last one is, flying the more high performance airplanes you get in, the less margin there is when you have a control incident, right? Because if you're in something like a 172 or a Cherokee that has a pretty draggy airfoil and has fixed gear and won't accelerate when you lose control and get the nose pointed at the ground, the likelihood is you're going to respond in about the same amount of time, but you may have accelerated from, say, if you're flying at 100 knots and you get the nose pointed at the ground, you may start pulling back on the controls at, say, 140 knots. Whereas in an airplane like this, if you're flying at 130 or 140 knots, you lose control and you get the nose pointed at the ground, you will very quickly get to 200, 210, 220 knots. And then when you initiate that same recovery maneuver, right, which is usually haul back on the controls, that's when you get into issues with
breaking wings,
pulling parts off of the airplane.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think they said about 3.8, I think, is the maximum structural limit for the maximum positive load factor.
Yeah, that's the standard category load factor for that's the load factor for a standard category airplane.
Ah, okay. A King Air that flew the approach shortly before the incident aircraft. I think they said they got into the clouds about 4,500 feet. They broke out about 1,000 feet. So as you said, if they were already way higher airspeed than they should be when they actually pop out in this spiral left turn, and probably airspeed rapidly increasing, and then it's just not a good situation to be in when you yank back on the controls to keep from hitting the ground. The thing just breaks up. That's pretty sad. There was a the pilot, the doing the pedal turns. I think he's what he termed them. The student pilot, and then a third passenger. So there were 3 on board the aircraft that perished, and nobody on the ground was injured or killed. So very sad.
Yep. And the other thing is the Mooney is very well known for its structural robustness. I guess for lack of a better term, I think the Bonanza is a very good airplane, but in the history of the Bonanza, there early on, there were some fairly well known structural issues. But the Mooney has always been known as a very strong airplane. So there was a fair amount of, interest and intrigue maybe when the pictures specifically that picture that you paused it on with the wings basically folded up like a carrier airplane right before it hit the ground.
Yep. All right. Let's go to the part of our. Shoot! I thought I had that all ready to go. The getting to know us segment of the show. So I'd like to find out what Nick C has been up to recently, because he hasn't been with us in recent shows. Anyway, getting to know us is that time of the show where we get all caught up. And so, Nick, tell us, what have you been up to?
Yeah, so been fairly busy with work as usual. We had some pretty dramatic changes at work that happened last week, so that kind of stacked me up and precluded me from joining the show. And right now, I think I've got a trip for work out to California planned next week, so I'll be back out at the office for about a week next week, which may or may not affect my availability for when we record.
Okay.
I'm hoping that I can still make it work, but in addition to that, I've been working a lot on airplanes. We've had both of our airplanes have had gone out of annual, so we've been completing the annual process, and spent a lot of time Thursday and Friday finishing up the Luscombe. I think we had a engine issue with the Luscombe that I think we got sorted out. Did some work on the exhaust valve of one of the cylinders, so I think we've got that kind of squared away. So all we're lacking there is to put the cowling back on and put the prop back on, and that airplane should be ready to go. And then spent most of the weekend working on my airplane. Had it all taken apart. My dad had looked at the engine, so the engine was all complete, but he went through and finished off his inspection of the airframe and the controls and everything. So I got that all put back together, and then did the landing gear inspection, which is a pretty comprehensive effort. It usually takes me about 4 or 5 hours. So there's a lot of various characteristics that have to be measured, spring loads, cable tensions, to ensure that over the course of the year, things haven't gone out of rig due to wear, or you don't have any issues with various aspects of that system. So got that all wrapped up, and I'm hoping by the end of this week we'll have both of the airplanes back in service. So that'll be exciting.
Awesome. So these annuals that you talk about, how often do you have to do that?
Well,
Bing.
let me.
Oh, you're cruel.
You have to do them. You actually have to do them every 13 months.
Oh, it's not a funny answer.
Because you can fly it for 12 months after, right? So you can fly it from when you do it until the end of the 12th month, and then. But yeah, obviously it's a periodic inspection once a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't pick up on the annual thing in the year.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Okay.
In
my mind, that was a lot funnier.
Well,
just to kind of put it out there.
It's reasonable that there are some people who do it. So you sign off the annual, and then it's good to the end of the month that you signed it off on. So, like for instance, if last year I signed off my annual sometime around February 11th or something. So the annual is good for the end of the month
Ah.
12 months from there. So my annual is good until February 28th of this year.
Mhm.
And so there are people who every year push it back a month. And so they basically get 13 months every year.
I see. Yeah.
And over the
Yeah.
course of airplane,
Save some money.
It does save some money.
Yeah.
You know, in my, for me, I would rather have them lined up in the winter when there's not very good flying time.
Mhm.
So I would rather just eat the month to keep the annual in the
Right.
January, February timeframe rather than, you know, run the risk of doing the annual in June and having something go wrong and the airplane's down for a month or two in the middle of the good flying weather.
Yeah, that's not good. All right. Yeah, great to have you with us again. And we completely understand about your work situation. Tell me the truth. Is that they decided to mount the tail of that special thing that backwards or something? No. Okay. So, Captain Nick, what have you been up to, sir, since our last? I know it wasn't that long ago that we recorded. It was just a few days ago, right? Thursday?
Well, that's very true. I jumped into a car and drove for 500 miles.
Oh, that's right. You did something.
I did. And
Big
halfway
thing.
through my journey, I stopped and chatted to some lovely people. I've got a bit of a video. Can I stick it up?
Oh, stick it in there.
Okay.
That's what she said.
Hi, Jeff. And I'm not anywhere near home. I had to cross the line that I never normally cross, go north of the Wash. And I'm up in bloody Yorkshire. Don't tell anybody, please. My reputation will be ruined. Okay, I've been here at the lovely, what do we call it? We're at Leeds Bradford Airport. There's not much I can say about that, other than say, go look at YouTube at some of the landings, because the worst pilots in the world fly to Leeds Bradford Airport. You only have to look at their average landing in a bit of a crosswind to realise what crap they are. Anyway, I was here chatting to the Air Yorkshire Aviation Society, fine bunch of lovely Yorkshiremen who love airplanes. They're a great bunch.
They just don't know how to fly them.
They're one of the most interactive audiences. They love I've ever spotting them. Dealt with lots of lovely questions, lots of actually quite smart questions. So very impressed with that. The bloke who organises this is their chief. It's called Howard. And I'm going to introduce you, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself. So, hello, Howard.
You said all that with him there?
Hello.
Wow.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and about your amazing aviation society.
Well, I'm retired now, but I'm currently chairman of Yorkshire Aviation Society, about 150 like-minded people, half of which are spotters, but half of which are just interested in aviation. Personally, I've been in aviation since I was 18. Actually, since I was 13 when I joined the Air Cadets. But when I was 18, joined the Air Force, went down to Biggin Hill, Officer Aircrew Selection Centre, went through that for a whole week. Spent 5 years in the RAF, going to Bruggen, Ghan, Gibraltar.
Lovely.
Had a wonderful time, especially at Ghan. You start work at 7 in the morning, finish at 1, dipping the tanks. You can fry an egg on top by 8 o'clock. But yeah, and then you just go swimming on the coral. It was wonderful, Maldives. After that, left that and joined British Aerospace on 146 sales. Got a bit bored, so joined British Airways. 20 years, lovely. Thoroughly enjoyed it. End up as IT Director, BA Cargo. Decide I'd done my 20 years, time to do something different. So I end up running a software company doing air cargo for another 18 years before I retired. So, been in aviation all my time. I owe my whole life to aviation. I am a spotter. I've been spotting since I was 13. Last week was brilliant. Then went down to Waddington. Big exercise on. There was the Finnair with 6 F-18 Hornets. Every time they took off, they had to close the road because it made it shake so much. There was the Belgians with F-16s and the Indians with Mirage. Then down to Coningsby, where the Saudis were there with their Typhoons. Coningsby's wonderful at any time of year because it's always busy and noisy. They do come into Leeds Bradford sometimes, usually at 10 o'clock at night. I don't think the local populace like it. It's a bit noisy.
Quick
Anyway.
plug for your society. How do they find you?
They can find us at airyorkshire.org.uk website. Everything's there in terms of our speakers. We have one speaker a month. We organise visits. I had a recent one to Multiflight here. We're organising one to Liverpool, Sherburn, Church Fenton. And of course, we've got the Flying Legends display coming to Church Fenton this year. That's first ever. So if you're interested in aviation, just have a look on our website. It's £1 a month to join, so it's not a lot. So that's all from me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Howard. And I really appreciate the invitation, Dan. Now, someone else gate crashed. Jeff. Look at that. Do you recognize that horrible man? This is the amazing Grinner. We had him on the last show. He was in there in the chat room. Anyway, he's here in person. Grinner, what on earth are you doing up here?
Well, good afternoon, Captain Jeff and all the rest of the APGs. What am I doing here? Well, I live here. Well, almost close to here anyway. This is my part of the world. So when I heard that that Nick was coming up to Yorkshire to do the talk to the Air Yorkshire Aviation Society, I couldn't pass by the opportunity to pop over and reacquaint myself with Nick face to face, as we haven't seen each other for a good number of years. Probably pretty close to 30, I would think now.
Absolutely. I'd forgotten that we had even flown together. I blanked it out. Potted history of your amazing career, Grinner.
Potted history. Well, very similar to Howard, I started getting interested in aviation courtesy of my dad, who did time in the Air Force in the early 1950s, so just after the Second World War. I got the flying bug, started hanging around local airfields.
As you do.
As you do. Always wanted to just be a fighter pilot. I just wanted to fly fighters, and that was where I was driven to go. So I didn't go to university. I decided I'd got my private pilot's license at the age of 17. I joined the Air Force at 18, so no college degree, and did 21 years in the Air Force flying fighters, flying Lightnings, and then Tornado F3s, the aeroplane that Nick definitely doesn't like. But I actually got very close to 3,000 hours on it. So I was one of the higher houred people on that aeroplane. And then 19 years ago, I left and I joined one of the large and expanding low-cost companies in the UK. Initially flying the Boeing 737, and I've been flying the Airbus 320 family for the last 14 years now. And I just jumped ship a few months ago. And I joined another very successful airline based actually in the north of England. So similar job to what I was doing previously at the previous airline, but with a far lesser commute than I used to do. So that's my potted history.
Brilliant. And that's it really, unless you have a final sort of handover?
No, not at all. It's nice to pass on a little bit of feedback. I've been thinking to myself for quite a while that it was time I did some feedback. It's been quite a considerable amount of time. So it's been great to actually see Nick face to face and to do this feedback directly to the show.
Brilliant.
So that's me. So thanks very much to all APGs. Still a fantastic podcast. Keeps me going on I still do have to commute. So back to you in the studio, Jeff.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you for the throw. And obviously he had been drinking, all those nice things he said about Captain Nick at the end, especially now I understand why you were saying all those bad things about the people that live up there in Yorkshire. I didn't realize you had him sitting across from you. That makes sense now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a very pleasant time. And the talk went down very well, and Howard looked after us, looked after me extremely well. He was a lovely guy and a great host. And it was great to see Grinner again, because he reminded me that we had flown together in the Tornado, and I had to have a look in my logbook. And there are the two flights I did with him. May the 22nd, on 1991, I think it was. And we're in Tornado F3, and Mr. Smith You've seen The Matrix, haven't you? There's Mr. Smith and Mr. Anderson.
Ooh.
We made a good crew, didn't we?
Yeah.
Anyway, Gritter was, we didn't have a QI pilot who would normally do the dual checks to let you go live in air-to-air gunnery on the flag. But Grinner had to come up and do that for us. So we borrowed him from his squadron, which was down south at the time. So we flew together twice. The first time was a DNCO, duty not carried out, because when we got to the flag, it was flying at about 45, 50 degrees because the weight had probably fallen off the bottom of the spreader bar. And the flag has to be upright. Otherwise, your distance perception, it becomes a problem and you're likely to fly into it. And it's very hard to hit when it's not flying upright. So I think that's why we binned the first one anyway. They dumped that flag probably in the North Sea, I expect. And we went off again in the afternoon and had another go. But he passed me, so that was good. I was
excellent.
So that was fun to be reminded of that. And he's a lovely guy. He really is. Thoroughly enjoyed our
he seems like a really nice guy.
Hours together. Yeah. So altogether, that was been my last few days. Very pleasant indeed. But it's been a bit of a rush, and now I'm looking forward to a couple of weeks without too much to do.
Excellent. Enjoy this retirement thing.
Oh yeah, I need to get a bit of time off for good behavior.
Just really quickly, I might have more information. Hang on before we do that. I was just going to say that I just flew. I picked up a trip, and it was a 3-day, 2-leg trip. Sunday night, flew out to up to Harrisburg, and then this morning came back, one flight back. And so I had all day yesterday off, which I used to finish up the editing of the last episode and publishing it. And now here we are on episode 564. And I have to say that the first officer that I flew with was a U.S., well, I guess you're always a Marine, U.S. Marine Corps F-18 driver, pilot, of course, and even despite that, he was actually a nice guy. So, just wanted to throw that out there.
You didn't have to ask him what he did before, did you? He just came out and told you.
Actually, he was not as egocentric as most of the fighter pilots that I know, like Captain Nick. No, I'm just kidding. He didn't volunteer that information immediately. I mean, it was probably at least 5-10 minutes into our relationship.
Before the first beer is finished, that's usually when you get it in.
Anyway, really a great time spent with him. We had a really nice dinner at the hotel. It was a steakhouse situation, a pretty good one there in Harrisburg that is right at the hotel, and we really enjoyed that. All right. So now let's talk about the cover art from the last episode, Flying High, referring to the what was it called, the tandem bike air something or other. But
that was that very unfortunate incident with a couple of guys who they discovered had imbibed. They were neither of them were qualified to do what they were doing.
No,
and they had been imbibing in substances which it's best not to have in your system.
Yeah, it's kind of frowned upon.
When you go fly.
But it's interesting that you found this photo of them right before they crashed. Yeah,
absolutely.
So yeah,
I must get a pair of those goggles. They look great fun.
They do look. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to work out how that tandem actually works. How does it fly?
I don't know. It's interesting that the guy's right shoe is quite different than his left shoe. Obviously, the drugs affected his decision making, choice of shoes.
Yeah, he's put odd shoes on.
This mid-journey thing is interesting. How it kind of comes up with these images.
Yeah, I correct some of them. Others, and have you counted their fingers?
Yeah, that the fingers are no thumbs, just 5 fingers.
Thumbs and 5 fingers, yes.
Yeah, interesting.
Strange blokes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very good. I'm enjoying playing with it.
And that's what he said.
Mid-Journey.
Mid-Journey. I'm sorry, misunderstood. I did see the show information, the show number on the top collar of the T-shirt of the guy in the back.
The instructor, yes.
The Gib, the instructor pilot. Okay, the instructor that was not qualified to be an instructor.
Try not to make it too hard, otherwise people stop looking.
And that's not what you want to hear her say. Okay, let's continue on. Anything else that we do? We'll do a coffee fund with Stephanie. Maybe we'll have somebody so we won't have to do this sad puppy thing. Maybe, hey, somebody out there, send us a donation, and then we'll have something to talk about for the coffee fund. Okay, and let's quickly, since I'm hoping Greg is still with us, Greg Peterson, our big ass fan, and he sent us some feedback. Number 16, and he said, "Hey crew, I have waited 30 years to make this announcement and have known about this change for over a month, but I wanted to wait until it was official. As of Monday, April 3rd, which was yesterday, I'm officially an employee in the aerospace industry."
Hey.
Yay! Let's see. Wow. There we go. Yay!
That's a good job.
And let's see.
Greg.
Pardon me? Oh, big ass aerospace guy. Gotcha. Big ass. Okay, gotcha. I started a job as an engineer at a major aircraft engine manufacturer in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'll be working on combustors and structural components on all of their major commercial, regional, business, and marine engines. This is the job that I've wanted since I graduated from college in the last century. Yeah, he's quite old. I look forward to my career in the aerospace industry, and hopefully this will take me to my retirement. Blue skies and tailwinds, Greg Peterson. Wow, that's
Absolutely.
Just awesome.
Good luck with
Good
that.
news. Great news.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that job. Sounds
And I
great.
did. I followed up with Greg and congratulated him in private, and I asked if I'm hoping this is information that I can share that because he lives in Lexington, his family, and Cincinnati is about I don't know, between an hour and a half drive, I think, to the north, 80-ish miles. And I was wondering if he was going to be commuting every day to his job, or if they were going to eventually move up closer to the Cincinnati area. And I think that the latter is the case. He's going to, he said, because it'd be like 4 hours a day, going there and coming back of a commute. That's
enough time to listen to the show.
Well, that's true. Yeah, you should consider that. Reconsider, Greg. Anyway, so that is awesome news, and really, really happy for you. And I know how long it's been that you've been wanting to get a job in the aerospace industry, and you did it, man. That's great.
Yeah, brilliant job.
You know what? We could probably do maybe the feedback from Armando.
Is it
timely?
got some video in it? Because I need to go to the loo.
Yes, there is a video. So get out of here.
That's perfect.
And I'll upload his video and then play it. So let me remove this one first, and I'll hit present video file. And this was just sent to us just a couple of hours ago. This is talking about a fresh video, and you'll see what I mean. Fresh video. I mean, this guy, man, fresh face. What a good-looking man this guy is. And for those of you who don't know Armando, he is one of the hosts of the Plain Talking UK podcast. And so we're going to hear from Armando right now.
Hey guys, listening back to 563 and the first story about the Challenger that had the upset. A couple notes. So this is a little insight into the corporate aviation side of the house. Had three kind of thoughts on it. One, with the first part, the pitot tube cover being left on. Another thing that happens is the heats come on. The pitot heats come on pretty much right after you start engines, and it could be a problem. You guys, I think somebody in the chat room said that it's possible that the ADC kept some of those values and from the airspeed mismatch, but this actually happens in Pilatuses, where people will accidentally leave the covers on, and depending on the type of cover, may actually melt a portion to it, whether it's the AOA vane or the pitot tube itself. It may actually melt some plastic from the cover onto the sensor, the pitot tube, and that could have been something. Just in the back of my mind, I was thinking, ooh, I wonder if they melted something onto it. Second thought I had on that story was Captain Jeff was going right along on the right track, where I would anticipate that there was some embarrassment from the rejected takeoff, especially opening the door, removing the cover, shutting an engine down, and then having a high profile passenger like that. Jeff, I think you hit the nail on the head, where they were probably rushed and should have gone back and reaccomplished in the Air Force. If we have a rejected takeoff, we would have accomplished the after landing checklist, gone back to the either the taxi checklist, before takeoff checklist, at which point they would have verified that they had their speeds. But it is very much a reset thing. I can almost guarantee you that they were rushed and probably just wanted to speed down the taxiway and get another takeoff before the passengers really got upset. The third kind of note from that story was something that you guys were both asking about, was how do we handle seat belts in the corporate side of the house? Well, we still have the same federal regulations, so we do flip on the fasten seatbelt sign. The Challenger doesn't have an attendant, usually a flight attendant, especially on a Part 91 flight where it's an owner flight, so they own that airplane. The company executive just managed it and provided the crew. There's probably not a flight attendant on board. The flight attendant would have, well, let's just say, probably not a flight attendant on board. On the co-pilot side, there is an automated panel where all of the cabin announcements, whether it's turbulence, if you flip the seatbelt sign on, it's an automated voice that says the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. So that's how we comply with regulations, is by actually playing out an audio recording of the required announcements. However, there's nobody back there to monitor whether or not the passengers are complying. So it's interesting, and this is just kind of a open kimono moment. Most of the owners don't wear their seatbelts. I don't know if it's a pride in ownership thing. I don't know what it is. We know as corporate pilots that most likely they're not wearing seatbelts in the back. Even if it's just one person, the primary or the principal, or if it's a full house, they're probably not wearing seatbelt signs. So we will, while we comply with the regulations and we turn the fasten seatbelts on after takeoff, if we know there's going to be something like turbulent air ahead of us, we will flip them off and back on to force them to force another announcement of the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. It's automated again, and hopefully them hearing that a second time, or at a time where they wouldn't usually hear it, would prompt them to actually buckle in. However, again, there's no one monitoring it in the back, and it is unlikely that they will actually follow those instructions. It's a nature of corporate aviation where we comply with the regulations the best we can. Some operators don't. They don't provide a safety brief. If they're the owners, they don't actually need a safety brief. It's their airplane. A lot of times when I'm flying owners, I will just let them know, hey, it's going to be an hour and a half. It's bumpy the first 10 minutes as we leave Charlotte. It's going to be nice, smooth flying. We'll be at 40,000 feet. There's no additional safety briefing because it's their airplane. They're used to it. And it's not a Part 135. As a Part 135 on-demand charter operation, you would be required to give a safety brief. But actually not in a Part 91. So there you go. Just a little insight into the weirdness and wonkiness of corporate aviation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Armando, for taking the time. It's amazing. Great information regarding that incident with the pitch trim situation and the fatality of the White House former State Department advisor. Yeah, good stuff. And that's stuff that I, obviously don't know anything about, Part 91, especially in, the corporate world. So good stuff. Thank you for sending that in. Again, that was Armando Carry On, part of the crew at the Plane Talking UK podcast. Please make sure you check them out. They record every Friday. Sometimes we record kind of at the same time, mess things up for them. Sorry, guys.
We do it on purpose.
Yeah.
It's an interesting glimpse into the psychology of the sort of people that can afford to own their own business jet, isn't it? That, perhaps they feel the rules that apply to your average traveler don't apply to them, which, I wonder at.
Right. And you missed it at the beginning. He was talking about the pedo cover, and then we were thinking that it might have had something to do with the messing up the system, the air data computer system. And he goes, it's very likely that's what happened there. And fact that they were probably a little embarrassed, by the, having to stop the airplane, shut down an engine, go out there, pull the cover off, and, get back on. And that was kind of led to that rushing things and not going over checklists and making sure that everything was the way it should be. And
yeah, when you're working for the guy that owns the airplane, I mean, if I had a problem and I'd had Richard Branson on board, it just adds another layer of pressure that you don't really want, and you can't really. It doesn't feel comfortable then to try and slow things down because you're doubly under pressure to speed things up.
Right.
It's dreadful situation to be in.
It is. All right. Well, that's going to end it for the first part of Airline Pilot Guy episode 564. And if you're around on Friday and you want to catch us live, we're planning on doing that in the morning, just a couple of days from now. So that's it.
Have a good part too, Jeff.
Well, thanks. I'll make sure that I say hi to Stephanie for y'all.
Please do.
And until then, have a great couple of days. And Liz, anything else to add before we sign off?
Just great to have you guys both on. Happy Easter if you celebrate, and just enjoy the weekend.
Happy chocolate egg time.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
10 a.m., Micah, is what we're aiming for.
Yeah. Actually, I think I was in the midst of texting, and I guess I didn't send it. I was thinking maybe doing it at 9 o'clock. That gives me a little bit more margin because I'm singing in a.
Works for me.
Oh yeah.
It just because it was Steffi's day off, I didn't know if she wanted to have a little lie-in or whatever. I was trying to.
Yeah, but it would be better for me if I had a little bit more margin between recording the second half and also getting to church because I'm singing in something that I need to be there at about 11:30.
Okay, that's great.
She'd have probably been up since 5 and done a 20-mile run.
Probably true.
I'll let her know.
Okay. Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, everybody in the chat room. Now I did notice.
Any ideas for?
I think I saw a few ideas.
The under pressure thing was.
Under pressure is, of course, kind of a
thing
theme or trend, but I think I saw some other suggestions.
I don't know if I did.
No, you did? Okay.
I'm going back and looking.
I thought somebody said something about, I remember somebody putting show title.
We could do Crikey.
Crikey. Yeah, like you can get a lot of artwork for that.
Crikey.
Delta P, of course, is.
Greg
course,
Peterson
Delta
said
P.
show title about the under pressure thing.
Oh, okay. So that was then
Yep, you
what
did
we were
pick it up.
talking about.
Good for you.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. Well, and who knows what potential titles we might come up. Of course, it'd probably be best if you already started working on the.
Oh, good Lord, no. I mean, I've just got to type a few lines out, and this AI does it for me now. This is so simple.
Now I wish I hadn't suggested this to you. Now we're not seeing any of your creativity anymore.
It's not actually true. I do actually have to think about it quite hard to tell it what to do.
Oh, that's true. That is the trick, right? Using words
Yes,
to describe a concept.
The right inquiry.
All right.
Okay, everybody. We're going to end the broadcast. Thanks.
Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, wherever you happen to be. If you're listening down in Australia or New Zealand, then I hope you're enjoying your Wednesday. And yeah, we'll see you.
Cheers, everybody.